Life often resists being split neatly into good and evil. Our actions may appear moral or immoral, but people themselves are rich with nuance. Every choice has motivation pushing it forward. Purity or wickedness rarely exists in isolation. This complexity is a mystery to a creature who understands only happiness. When something so innocent collides with human suffering, the result can be deadly. Takopi's Original Sin asks a haunting question. Can innocence survive in a world defined by pain? What begins as a mission of goodwill instead reveals how acts meant to heal can deepen wounds, and in doing so, it forces us to confront the fragile line between hope and tragedy. Here in this video, we'll unpack the message instilled in the story of Takopi's Original Sin. Deep in space exists Planet Happy, a world where only joy shines through, a land strikingly similar to the Garden of Eden. Its innocent settlers live untouched by suffering, each paradise watched over by a godlike presence, as if to preserve its purity. But on Planet Happy, there has always been the option to leave. Takopi makes that choice, departing his Eden on a noble mission, to spread happiness across the universe. Yet as a child of paradise, his world has never known grief, abandonment, or pain. These emotions are foreign to him, ones he'll be forced to wrestle with here on Planet Sol 3, Earth. The adventure of the little octopus begins in 2022, when he meets Marina, a blonde girl with a scar across her cheek, ostracized at school and broken at home by her parents' failed marriage and abuse. This is the first timeline Takopi experiences, though the story itself begins alongside a girl named Shizuka in 2016. The story itself is chronologically fragmented, but if we're to understand Takopi's Original Sin, it has to start here, the source of it. Armed with a toolkit from Planet Happy, Takopi believes he can erase suffering with little gadgets, flappy wings with promise of escape, the reconciliation ribbon that bypasses the hard work of forgiveness, the happy camera which rewinds life to a sunnier moment. Each gadget carries a symbolic weight, and yet all share the same flaw. They reduce human pain to a problem that has a quick fix. Takopi assumes these tools are enough to make people happy, but in doing so he underestimates the complexity of our world, a mistake that will define his sin. Takopi witnesses cruelty at school, abuse at home, and the collapse of Marina's relationship, but he cannot comprehend the sadness behind these experiences because he filters everything through his rose-tinted glasses. Most of all, he fails to recognize how destructive her bond with her mother truly is, assuming instead that this must be a normal way of showing love on Earth. His innocence makes him malleable, shaped by the very first encounters he has. What should appear as despair becomes normalized, absorbed not through the eyes of those who suffer, but through his own limited lens. And in that distortion lies his original sin. On his planet, Takopi and his kind spread happiness, but they have no comprehension of suffering, loss, or the complexity of human bonds. They can only impose this shallow version of joy they know. Brought to Earth, this ignorance becomes destructive. Takopi sees Marina's pain, yet pressures her to smile, unable to grasp the despair beneath. When Maria kills her abusive mother in a moment of fear and survival, she laments that if only she had killed Shizuka years earlier, her life might have been different. Takopi, incapable of understanding grief or moral nuance, accepts this idea as truth. He takes her words of covet not as a cry of a broken child who has just lost everything that made up her world, but as a universal law, that the girl who is Shizuka is evil. She must die for Marina to be happy. And so innocence, warped by ignorance, becomes Takopi's original sin. He returns to Planet Happy en route to the Happy Clock, intending to travel back to 2016 and kill the girl that made Marina's life hell. But before he can leave, Mother, the god of his paradise, tries to stop him, to erase the suffering he has absorbed and restore him back to innocence. In that moment, Takopi does the unthinkable. He strikes her. Violence learned on Earth has become the method by which he pursues his wish to make Marina smile. It's a turning point. His innocence, once untested, now confronts the complexity of human suffering. He corrupts the very Eden he came from. Like Adam cast from the garden, innocence gives way to sin. But here the fruit he bites into is Earth's suffering. His fall, though, is not into knowledge, but back into the ignorance of the truth of our world. Because his mother reset his memories, yet she failed to stop his departure back in time. So the underlying patterns remain unbroken. The cycle begins again of innocence learning the truth of Earth's people, this time in 2016, where the girl waiting in the park is not Marina, but Shizuka. There is nuance to every person. A one-sided view can make someone seem evil, seem like the source of all misfortune, but the reality is always more complicated. From the perspective of Marina, Shizuka is the daughter of the woman who stole away her father from the home, and the reason he is so verbally abusive to her mother, and the reason her mother is slowly deteriorating into an abusive, depressed mental patient. This family trauma gets cast onto Shizuka, the scapegoat for her misfortune, making her the target of her torment. She mirrors the abuse experienced at her mother's hand by beating this girl physically and tearing her down verbally like her father does to her mother. She becomes a bully, because that's the only way she can pass down the pain that was dumped onto her. The rage she can't aim at her mother gets displaced onto someone more vulnerable. She becomes a villain, an evil entity possessed by the sins of her elders. We see here a dark side of a girl we thought was a victim. Oftentimes people aren't just one or the other. They're both victims and assailants. Shizuka may grow up to take away her boyfriend and contribute to the girl's unhappiness. But here we are now, watching Marina brutally abuse her in their younger years. This is the very nuance of human behavior. But Takopi cannot grasp this yet. He has forgotten his first trip to Earth, so he has no ability to weigh the current Marina against the one he first met in 2022. All he knows is Shizuka's kindness and his desire to make this girl smile. Yet his gadgets, once more, fail to bridge the gap between happiness and despair. He starts to feel as if he is getting somewhere when Shizuka asks for the ribbon of reconciliation, believing she intends to use it to make amends with Marina. Yet when he finds her, he is confronted not by woven amends, but by the ultimate tragedy: suicide. It's a concept he doesn't fully understand. He doesn't know what emotions could drive someone to take their own life, nor does he see where he went wrong in trying to make the girl smile. He mourns the loss, yet he holds the power to reverse it. Having used the happy camera 3 days earlier with Shizuka, he can go back and change the past to prevent this future from being written. But given his persistent ignorance of human emotion and relationships, his lack of understanding of the mechanisms working against this girl's future, can he truly fix what seems unfixable? To stop this death, it's not as simple as making her smile. When you first experience this story without knowing Marina's past, or her inevitable future in 2022, she seems like a malicious embodiment of evil. Her actions aren't justified by the abuse she suffers, but they provide insight into why she behaves as she does. This insight allows us to understand her actions, even if we don't condone them. After all, actions can be evil, hurting another, but that doesn't make a person pure evil. People exist in shades of gray, capable of both good and bad simultaneously. That being said, it's hard not to feel, somewhere deep in your consciousness, the world might be a better place if Marina weren't in it. Shizuka would be freed from this additional source of pain, and every attempt by Takopi to force a resolution between the pair ends only in suffering at the hands of Marina. He is confronted with the harsh realization that he cannot guide these traumatized children towards a meaningful resolution. He lacks the fundamental knowledge to understand their cruel, complex society. In Japan, bullying is often inadequately addressed, with victims told to gamen, endure quietly, and resolve an issue without drawing attention. Because of this unspoken, isolating social policy, whole classes frequently rally around or ignore the victim's torment out of fear of being ostracized themselves, thinking if it's her, at least it's not me. Occasionally, someone may break from this norm and attempt to help, but like Takopi, without a full picture to understand, even their outstretched hand can be useless. This highlights another flaw embedded in the culture. Most victims choose to suffer in silence, having already been failed by society and the system. An outstretched hand can look less like support and more like false hope. Shizuka refuses to speak about her abuse from Marina or even the neglect she experiences at home. Teachers offer no resolution and appear to only push the idea of gamen further down her throat. Fear of being told to manage or to be ignored stacks and stacks until one gives in to the system and realizes help does not await them. All this wish-washy help or lack thereof is done to preserve a sense of harmony, but this kind of harmony creates a dangerous environment. The idea of wa in Japan is beautiful and a cultural keystone, but the lengths some go to maintain harmony, even if superficial or built on the suffering of the few, is all too cruel. Unless Marina is held accountable for her actions of cruelty, or the source of the problem, their incompetent parents, is addressed, nothing will change. Shizuka's suffering and Marina's abuse are layered with nuance. There are so many contributors to the final choice she makes that Takopi seeks to stop. But he comes to believe that if at least the vessel for Marina's mother's rage is removed, there will be some relief. So Takopi uses violence to create peace. Only he strikes the girl a tad too hard. It doesn't feel tragic, the loss of life. If anything, it feels relieving, like a weight lifted off our chest. The source of fear and pain in the story has been toppled. Shizuka is free, but that freedom, that smile etched across her face, feels just as wrong as the crime itself. Takopi tries to reset, to undo what happened, but the object he used to strike the girl was the very same camera he uses to reset time. This time there is no redo. He must live with the consequences of his action and the burden of blood on his hands. Yet his ignorance makes the burden light. Killing seems like a positive, because it made Shizuka finally smile. How tragic a world might it be where death gives way to bliss? It's cruel. This isn't how childhood should be. It leaves us with a sense of distress. How are we supposed to feel? How are we supposed to think? Or are we supposed to think about it at all? It's spiraling. To save a girl from suicide, Takopi killed another. That's the reality we face. A reality Takopi has yet to accept as morally questionable. On Earth, there is no Garden of Eden, no land untouched by the tragic cost of life and death, of killing and existing, of despair and happiness. Humanity is intertwined with the complex. The children in the story pay for the sins of their parents. Each is shaped by what they experience, and though they may still have a choice in how to act, it's often difficult to go against the path imposed by forces greater than themselves. It's easier to hate, to hide, to run away, especially at such a young age, when adults still see them as moldable objects. The children's silence towards their oppressors, their parents, and the adults in positions of power ultimately seals their fate. Enter Azuma, a boy shaped by his mother's pressure to meet unrealistic standards. He's compared to his brother, the one who achieves perfect scores, and made to feel inadequate even with a performance as high as 95. She withholds love and support, framing them as rewards rather than things a parent should naturally give. Starved for validation of his existence, Azuma finds it in the girl before him, someone who claims he's the only one who can help her, the only one who can show her how to cover up murder. He becomes roped into this mess because he feels needed by someone he loves. In doing so, he mirrors the conditional love his mother taught him. Just as he had to perform for his mother's affection, he performs loyalty for Shizuka, doing anything to earn her approval, even covering for murder. On the other side of things, Shizuka's father abandons her. Her mother controls her image and gives her voice no value. She invalidates her existence. In turn, Shizuka learns to bend others around her, leaning on Azuma, redirecting Takopi, and controlling others through quiet pressure rather than open confrontation. As a survival instinct, she repeats the cycle of control her mother used on Marina's father as a Lady of the Night, just with different methods. Shizuka becomes somewhat of a manipulator, though unintentionally, in reflecting the behaviors she learned. She pushes Takopi to impersonate Marina with one of his gadgets and pressures Azuma to take the fall for the murder, seeing anyone who resists her cries for help as just another person abandoning her and invalidating her existence. Any disagreement becomes personal rather than an argument over what's the morally right thing to do. These actions are set into motion by, yes, the murder, but also after her dog, the only stable presence in her life, is taken from her. Her goal becomes venturing to Tokyo to see Chappie, clinging to that connection as a lifeline. But as Azuma begins thinking for himself, confiding in his brother and breaking free from the burdens imposed by both his mother and Shizuka, the plan faces challenges. When Takopi and Shizuka go alone to Tokyo, what they find is not renewed happiness, but yet another experience dripping with sorrow. With the knowledge that her mother lied, Chappie likely put down for biting Marina, and her father claiming not to know her, Shizuka loses more than she bargained for on this trip. It is now sealed that she is completely alone. Even though Takopi sits by her side, he's just another person who fails to comprehend her pain. He still urges her to put on a happy face, to look for the positive, but their situation offers none. They are in the middle of Tokyo, an unfamiliar city. Her parents both wish she did not exist, and her one anchor in life, her dog, is gone. Takopi sees the same pain and dread in her eyes that he once saw in Marina's. The two run parallel lives, both cracking under the unbreakable weight of trauma inflicted by those who should care for you most. In desperation, Shizuka too turns to violence as a path towards liberation, acting out the only agency she believes she has left. She strikes Takopi with a rock, and by the time he awakens, she is gone, kidnapping her father's new children, believing this fantasy that, like goblins of fairy tales, they must have eaten her dog. Takopi's only friend vanishes into the city's density. Nothing he has done has brought happiness. That is the reality Takopi must accept. His ignorance has only contributed to the children's suffering, and forcing his idea of happiness has only created more sadness. To add to his confusion, memories of 2022, his time with Marina, and his initial decision to kill Shizuka return after he was struck by that rock. He is left asking himself, what makes a person good or bad? His older self assumed Shizuka was bad because she interfered with Marina's happiness, yet Shizuka was kind to him, and Marina, the girl he assumed was good, was the very person who abused her. His questions are met with uncertain answers when Azuma returns. A natural response to abuse is distrust, a concept that deepens the suffering such acts creates. Azuma has his brother, Shizuka has Azuma's outstretched hand, and Marina has a choice to befriend someone with similar trauma, only she chooses the path of foe. Yet somehow, perhaps due to the absurdity of this being's existence, they all find comfort talking to Takopi. Azuma speaks to him now, thanking him despite the chaos he caused. Because of Takopi, he was able to open up to his brother and realize he had someone to confide in about his turmoil. He learned that communication can help ease the pain within his heart. And in turn, Takopi learns from Azuma, people can be both good and bad at the same time. That is just how humans work. And this understanding applies to all aspects of his life. One can be happy or sad. Mood is not something he can force upon others. Happiness comes and goes. That is how humanity is. Yet in failing to fully grasp the children's suffering, he still cannot undo the sadness he encounters. He must learn when to shut the fuck up and be a listener, not a fixer. Not everything can be turned into a happy song. As Azuma says goodbye, Shizuka takes his place in this park, attacking Takopi out of anger and frustration. He becomes her victim of abuse, just as she was once Marina's. But what separates Takopi from being just another victim is that he speaks. He communicates both empathy and emotion to his abuser. He tells Shizuka how much she's hurting him, how sorry he is for her situation and for contributing to it. He had failed her by attempting to push happiness instead of validating her feelings of abandonment, loss, and pain. Happiness, he learns, simply cannot be imposed from the outside. It has to come from being seen, understood, and allowed to feel the depths of one's struggles. And recognizing this, Takopi understands that compassion isn't about covering up sorrow with joy, but about standing beside someone in their suffering so that healing can become possible. Because in healing lies the real joy. In making amends and choosing to walk together through this road of suffering, he is able to make Shizuka truly happy. As they sit by the water, a smile creeps across her face, one shaped by pain and by the quiet love the alien shows as he sits beside her while she mourns. This moment is enough, but Takopi knows he can do more for her. In his eyes, his presence on Earth had only worsened things for the children, because he could not fully grasp the complex scope of human emotion and reason. So he gives his happy energy to the children for one final attempt to rewrite the past, this time without himself in it. Through the ultimate sacrifice of his own life, he transforms into a subconscious guiding force, like a moral compass. They retain the free will to ignore it, but they can also choose to follow it. He says goodbye to Shizuka, who is fun playing with her, but for her to truly smile, he knows he cannot remain a physical presence in her life. Takopi may have believed he only created more suffering, but the memory of his time on Earth still carries the possibility of change. His ineptness may have led to terrible outcomes, but those tragedies might have unfolded with or without him. And now, in the ruins of countless timelines where innocent children were broken by the worst life has to offer, they are left with something new, the faint, happy voice in their heads, whispering that today is another day, a new day that could be different. It doesn't have to be, and it might not be, but it could be. It's a foolish little voice, with hopes bigger than reality, but it's that kind of foolishness that lets us keep walking through the darkest storms, believing that somewhere ahead, the skies will clear. The children still face the same troubles, the same tangled relationships, the same inherited sins, but now their suffering doesn't feel inevitable. Takopi may have made things worse in each timeline, but never out of malice. His sin was ignorance, and through living on Earth, through tasting the same fruit as Adam and Eve, he learned that happiness and forgiveness cannot be forced. They are cultivated through pain, through suffering, and ultimately through connection. His memory etched into their souls leaves behind that chance. And as Marina raises her fist against Shizuka, a notebook slips from the girl's bag, revealing a simple drawing of an octopus. Her fist wavers. She scoffs at how stupid the creature looks, and Shizuka adds that it looks like someone who would never shut up. With a small hesitation, things begin to change. This moment creates an opening for the abuser to see their victim as human, not as a source of her pain and trauma, but just another person affected by the cruelties of life. Takopi's lasting effect wasn't in the gadgets he brought or the timelines he altered, but in the revelation of options the children now see before them. Azuma doesn't have to isolate himself and trade everything for the faint hope of his mother's love. Marina doesn't have to pass her mother's rage onto someone else. Shizuka doesn't have to withdraw completely just because both her parents abandoned her. Communication and expression are the only things that can liberate us from the pressures that weigh us down. Without words, pain festers into anger, anger hardens into hate, and hate inevitably leads to suffering. The moment these two girls begin to speak, even if raw, clumsy, and imperfect, is the moment they stop being bully and victim, and instead become what they always were, two children, each carrying wounds inflicted by the sins of their parents. Talking makes the hidden visible. Marina can't reduce Shizuka to a punching bag once she speaks, because she's confronted with the raw humanity of her voice. Bullying is partly about control. By terrorizing Shizuka, Marina distracts herself from her own helplessness at home, gaining a false sense of power. But when Shizuka speaks, the dynamic shifts. The relationship is no longer unilateral. They don't suddenly become friends because of this small act, but their pain begins to overlap. Both are victims, shaped by the terrible decisions of their parents. Takopi's Original Sin captures not only how deeply home life can scar and mold a child, but also how transformative words can be. Talking makes pain shareable. It turns suffering from something isolating into something recognized. That's what breaks the cycle of violence. Our human gift of speech. That's what frees the girls from lives defined by misery and shows them a future that continues despite it all. Marina and Shizuka are bound by trauma. Two girls shaped by pain and the weight of broken parents. They overcome despair through human connection, something each had avoided in their own way. Shizuka withdrew, Marina lashed out. Their roles, as we've seen, could have easily been reversed. It was only a chance that things unfolded as they did. We leave this story with a raw truth. There is no paradise, no planet happy that guarantees joy without end. Humanity is marked by knowledge, and with knowledge comes shame, morality, suffering. But knowledge also gives us spectrums. It allows us to recognize happiness and sadness, love and hate, guilt and resolve. There is beauty in that duality. There is bliss to be found in the aftermath of hardship. We only need to endure long enough to wade through the storms. The ideal Takopi carried, that happiness could exist all the time, is a critique of blind optimism. It's the danger of overt positivity, of pretending sadness has no place in the human condition. Sometimes life is just sad, and that's okay. Planet Happy may promise paradise, but for humans, such a place doesn't exist. Real life is layered with pain, history, psychology, and scars passed down from those before us. Abuse, bullying, and despair cannot be erased with a smile or a quick fix. By trying to force happiness onto what he couldn't understand, Takopi deepened the suffering of the children around him. His mistake shows us that good intentions without comprehension can be just as destructive as malice. The lesson then is not about fixing others, but about listening, truly listening. Listen to the people who disagree with you. Recognize why they see the world as they do. If we always lead with hostility, if we reduce others to enemies or obstacles instead of humans shaped by their own wounds, we forfeit the chance to build a world grounded in compassion rather than punishment. Happiness, suffering, pain, and love. These are not separate paths, but pieces of the same grand picture. Takopi's sacrifice revealed that even in a world where cruelty exists, despair doesn't have to be carried alone. Communication, empathy, and connection can turn isolation into shared understanding. And though cruelty may be a part of this world, pain a part of daily life, we at least have one another to make that cruelty a little less lonely. And that, I think, is one of the most beautiful things humanity has to offer.